Let's face it, having tough conversations with staff who aren't hitting the mark is never fun. Camps are built on relationships, and shifting a camper care mindset to managing staff performance can feel awkward and uncomfortable. It adds in fears of defensiveness, gossip, or escalation, and sometimes feedback gets softened or just avoided altogether. In this episode, we are excited to sit down with HR consultant Diane Slater to talk about how to handle these moments. Running camp should be about people, not paperwork. UltraCamp helps you manage staff, registration, and communication in one place, so you spend less time on tasks and more on camp. Find out more at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by GoCamp Pro. We have been podcasting for 11 seasons, and we knew we just needed to continue because just how people grow and change, so does our industry. So here we are, ready to discuss new challenges, new ways of handling situations, new advice from those doing the work, and new ideas to help us all do our jobs better. Our commitment to intentional leadership training just grows stronger every year. So here we go again, as we do all we can to help you develop your best ever leadership training. So welcome everybody to another episode of Camp Code. I'm super excited for this one today. And as always, we'll begin with introductions. So Gabrielle, would you lead us off, please?
Yes. Hey, everyone. My name is Gabs at camp. I go by she, her, elle for those that are French represent. I work at Camp Waro. Camp Waro is an all-girls camp where we focus on creating a positive environment for gender minorities, and we do that while speaking in French and English.
Beautiful. And would you like to introduce our very special guest today, please?
I would. So here we have Diane Slater, as I knew her at camp as Dee Dee. And when I was a camper, she was one of the really cool campers at Camp Waro and has morphed into our HR consultant, which started off when we had a very sticky situation when a staff member's expectations of us didn't match her. The reality of us didn't match her expectations of us. And it was quite a tough little situation that we had. We called Diane, she helped us out, and we've just kept her ever since. And I said to Beth, you know who would be amazing? I can't gatekeep Diane Dubé from the world. She has taught me so much and has taught our leadership so much on having tough conversations with staff. And truly, I feel like since we've been working with her, we have prevented some things that could have escalated. So I said, we got to get her on the show. So we have Diane here. Diane, you can tell us a little bit more about yourself if you'd like.
Oh, thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. My husband jokes that Camp Waro is my first love and that he came along next. And so it's always been a delight to help wherever I can. I'm a total HR nerd. I live and breathe HR just because it's not just my job. It's who I am. I love it. So I'm thrilled to be here today and thrilled to help you out and love helping people solve tough situations because it doesn't just help you with your staff. It also helps you in your personal life. Sure makes my house a lot calmer.
Excellent. Oh, I'm excited. I'm Beth Allison. I'm co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro, and my pronouns are she, her. And I'm a camp consultant and trainer, and I eat, sleep, and drink staff training. I see opportunities wherever I go, and I write them down and keep them for the next podcast or the next training sessions. And I have my husband now doing it too, but he puts it in his phone. I write it in a book, old school. But you just see things and you're like, oh, I could use that. So there's all kinds of stuff. I did a whole session once on how camp is like Chapter's bookstore. Anyway, but that was a long time ago, and it was very exciting. All right. So we are so thankful that you're here, Diane. Thank you so much for joining us. And although it rarely ever happens at camp, we have to have hard conversations with our staff and our campers and parents, board members, etc. So Diane's going to share her wisdom to talk about how to handle these moments with clarity and compassion, from sort of those small course corrections to the bigger, hey, we need to talk conversations. So I'm going to pass it back to Gab, and we're going to get started.
Yes. So Diane, now I'm going to say, why do you think so many camp professionals find these conversations difficult? I think a lot of people do. find these conversations difficult, but in your experience, why is we know we need to talk to our staff members early on when there's little issues, but some people avoid. In your experience, why is that?
There's a couple of things that go on at camp that are actually way harder than those of us working in the more professional services business world. And the main thing is you're dealing with a large group of people who don't have their complete and full adult brain yet. The psychiatric community defines that as happening around 25, 26 years old, something along those lines.
Mhm.
And so you're dealing with people who are still children in their minds. And this is likely their first job. And if it's not their first job was probably no more complex than timekeeping at hockey or being a cashier. Well, if they were a cashier in a grocery store, they'd have actually learned some pretty decent customer service skills. So probably not. But they've done some of your basic high school, secondary school level jobs. So they haven't had to learn how to be a professional yet. And as we've discussed on many occasions, they still have helicopter parents floating around them, trying to solve their battles for them because their parents just want them to be successful humans and haven't necessarily let go yet. I myself had a 17-year-old counselor kid this summer, and that was a kid who hadn't yet started school outside of the home. So it was still very much my child under my protection versus next year. I'm hoping it feels different because my kid's now gone off to university and it's just a whole different way of life because they're out of the home. Then the other thing you're dealing with is that camp is on the surface, basically Santa Claus rainbows and unicorns all tied up into one beautiful package. Where if you were a camper in your life, it's just your shiny, happy place, right? It's a magical world where you walk in and you recapture the beauty of youth, the memories, the fun. People forget it's a business. You're running a company. You're not running a resort. It's not Dirty Dancing where you get to go and do the dance classes and try on the wigs. There were staff members in that movie too, now that I'm aging myself quite dramatically. But that's the second problem is that they forget, especially I think the ones who were campers and then become counselors, they forget that they've gone from being a customer of a business to an employee of the business. And that's a pretty shocking difference. And I think that's one of the keys to why it's so hard to have a tough conversation in a camp setting. Now you add on to that why it's a tough thing for everybody in the world is because unless you enjoy conflict, which typically then you get labeled a bully, we're raised in our culture to play nice in the sandbox, to share, to care, to have empathy, all those wonderful customer service traits, but it means you don't want to rock the boat. It means that you don't want to stir up trouble. You don't want to make someone feel bad. So then we get into the whole, well, we should make it into, and I won't quote what the people in my professional industry call it because that's construction adjacent. So the language is inappropriate. But the sandwich you're making has, the good, then the bad, then the good. And unfortunately, when you get caught up in that mindset, what often happens is you're so focused on cushioning it that you minimize all of that feedback. And then you're not actually having a tough conversation at all. You're essentially going, oh my gosh, I love this and that and all these wonderful things. And, oh, by the way, could you please put out the garbage when you're supposed to? But, oh, you're so amazing. And everybody loves you. And it has zero impact. So, yeah. And that's just our human nature, but also our culture. We're not raised to be straightforward, direct, and full of feedback.
Yeah, it's I find it so fascinating, and Travis had shared with us an article about Gen Z having a hard time receiving feedback because they get so much feedback online, and so it just feels like, from Instagram and TikTok, like it just feels like criticism, and so it's hard to receive that feedback. And I was thinking, have you met boomers? Have you tried to give a boomer like feedback? Because I have.
Watch it.
Not you, Beth. You're
I am a
you're an
boomer.
exception. You and Jackie are an exception, but there's a couple of others that, I don't want to throw Don Rail under the bus, but Don Rail, he's to give some feedback to. But I think it's not also, we're not learning how to do that properly. We're not, at school you get a B plus or a C minus. There's not much feedback. It's just, this is your grade and that's it. So within society, we haven't really learned through the generations how to provide proper feedback, do it well, and how to receive it. It's sort of two skill sets. I'm wondering about what we were talking about, the ones that have the, they were campers and now staff members. Our leadership team members are, young, don't have the full brain development yet. Not everybody's past 25 in leadership team. Most of them are younger than that, very mature, very experienced, but they do have a camper support mindset versus I'm somebody's boss mindset, because that's what made them great camp counselors. They centered campers, and that's a caring mindset. I'm here for their development. I'm here to support them regardless of what's how they're quote unquote performing. But now they have to shift. How can we help our leadership team members make that shift from staff are our staff, they're not our campers, in a kind and respectful way?
Absolutely. That's a really important question that a lot of businesses struggle with in general terms. And in the professional services world, it's making the shift from I manage an individual contributor to I manage managers. And then, of course, up the chain to I'm CEO and manage big functional leaders, et cetera, right? Because your role as well is very different. And I'm guessing that no one sat and coached you, Gab, on how to be the director of a leadership team who manages staff who care for campers. And the world lucked out that you happen to have really strong emotional intelligence, curiosity, and insatiable curiosity about the world, and the willingness to say, I'm not an expert in this. I'm going to go talk to my alumni who are experts, and I'm going to hire other people who are experts, and I'm going to talk to people like Beth and camping association members. Not everyone has that knowledge or that capability, because you have to be a curious person. For a camp counselor who's caring for others, the critical skills and the things we value in them are quite different. And so I think making that transition to leadership team where you're now managing counselors instead of caring for campers, part of it is actually defining for them what that difference is. So as a camp counselor, you value they're coaching the kids in how to get through their day and how to do their activities. They're caring for them. They're showing empathy. They're valuing, the success of their cabin group at their activities and their various engagements and initiatives that they're doing at camp. When you become a leadership team member, suddenly you're valuing performance management, both the positive and the negative sides of that with their staff. You're valuing talent development because they're having to go in and teach and grow their staff. You're valuing them focusing on the development of others with that full summer view, or even that multi-summer view versus that day-to-day view. So I'm a camp counselor. I wake up in the morning. I know what I have to do today. I'm not so worried about tomorrow. I become a section head. I know what my week looks like. I don't have to worry too much about the month or the full summer. Now I'm a leadership team member. Back in April, I should already know what the whole summer is going to look like. I should know exactly when I'm doing my formal coaching conversations versus the one-off, quick puddle time chats, puddle time ponders, as Waro calls them. They have that schedule of events in their mind because they have a full summer view. And then you, as director, of course, have a 3 to 5 year view at all times. And so I think it's about defining what that looks like at each stage and actually spelling out, we value something different in you and you have different critical skills. So the difference of I provide clear direction to campers and I help my campers learn and grow as people and have fun, moving to I build leadership and strengthen these people because they might replace me as a leadership team member someday. And I empower them to lead the kids independently is two very different things.
I love that.
An exciting start. I can't wait for later. It's brilliant. This is great. My brain is just going in all kinds of different directions. So we're going to take a quick ad break to hear from our wonderful sponsors, and we'll be back in just a few moments to pick some more of Diane's brain. For Camp Code listeners, unlock Ultra Camp's operations checklist for new directors, a free download to help you prepare for a smooth season. Find it at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Running camp comes with countless moving parts. UltraCamp helps you stay on top of them. Organize activities and daily schedules, manage wait lists and cabin assignments, automate billing and payments, centralize all camper and staff info in one place. With UltraCamp, camp operations run smoother, so directors can lead with confidence. Book your free customized demo at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. All right, we are back, and I think we all know the risks of avoiding tough conversations. What happens to team culture when all that happens? That's probably why we're having this podcast in the first place. So, in addition to that sandwich theory that you were talking about before, which, yeah, it just makes my skin crawl when I hear people doing that still. But what are other common phrasing mistakes that people make that make others defensive during feedback? What are the things that we say that makes our staff just, they put their backs up and they're just not open to hearing the feedback because they're just so defensive at that point?
I think that the number one mistake all of us make, whether it's in our day-to-day, whether it's coaching others, is making assumptions and then placing the value of our assumption on the other person without approaching with curiosity. So you were rude to this other person versus when I heard you say this thing, it made me feel like maybe you were being rude. What was going on for you? Right? So that difference of I accuse versus I approach with curiosity and inquire, because sometimes we're also wrong. And so that also opens up the door to them saying, oh, actually, seconds after you disappeared behind the building, we were both cracking up laughing because that's an inside joke that we have. Or, gosh, I didn't think of it that way. You're right. That's probably why she got mad and stomped off. So that's usually the main thing. The other thing is not setting the stage properly, right? So I think most of us are pretty good from a very young age. You know how bad it feels to get yelled at or get in trouble or be told off in front of others. So most people just intuitively know, go somewhere private, wait till there aren't other people around, have a quiet space without distractions, and then take that deep breath yourself first and reflect quickly on your words. It can be a 5 to 10-second reflection. It doesn't have to be mapping out the whole conversation, but choosing your words carefully to say, when I saw, when I heard, when I read, it made me feel, or it made me think, and then inviting the other person to contribute to the conversation. The other thing we can do that's a real gift for young people receiving feedback to help them not be as defensive is to actually explain the concept of feedback, right? Because in the school system, we often just get a paper back with an A, a B, a C, or a number grade, whatever it is. There's comments on it, but no one ever sits us down and explains to us why that's of value. I'll never forget, I had a grade 10 English teacher who I was the only one who liked that person. But I grew up with a relatively tree-hugging, granola-eating mom, given that, she was born in the 40s and me in the 70s. And so she always taught us the importance of feedback, and she would explain why to us as kids on the emotional intelligence front before that was a cool thing to do. We lucked out with our parents. And so a lot of these kids have never received tough feedback. They've grown up in an era of tons of information flying at them, but never the why. And never that concept, as cheesy as it sounds, that feedback is a gift. So if we start out our staff training early in the summer with, hey, over the course of the summer, you're periodically going to get feedback. And you know why? Because you're not sociopaths and none of you have come here to do a bad job on purpose. Maybe not phrasing it quite like that, but I actually do phrase it like that at work.
Beth is taking note.
Definitely using that.
And that's the key, right? Most people, there are the odd exceptions. Most people never enter a workplace or a party or a social situation or wherever they are with an intention to do something bad or to offend or to do the wrong thing, make the wrong choice. And so if we are very careful in explaining, you're periodically going to get feedback, and it won't always feel good because everybody likes to think they're doing a great job. But the only way I can help you learn and grow and get better is when I actually give you that feedback and my perspective. And so you often see that with counselors. You try to give them the feedback and they either pretend to listen or don't. And then they go on their merry way with their story about, well, I was tired, or it was raining that day, or it's not fair, or well, my co-counselor who was supposed to do X didn't show up, or, Gab is just generally mean. I don't know what her problem is, right? Whatever excuse comes to mind that particular day. And I would actually suggest that that's an opportunity to say, I want to stop you right there for just a second and step back and talk about why we're having this conversation at a sort of high theoretical level, right? I genuinely believe feedback is a gift. And the reason I think that is that if no one had ever course corrected me, I would still be operating the way I was when I was a 17-year-old counselor. And that would not make for a very professional camp director, leadership team member, whoever you happen to be. And I genuinely wish to help you learn and grow. So if you don't want to hear what I have to suggest, even though it could be a little bit hard to hear, you're not going to learn and grow. And then you reduce your odds of continuous development, continuous learning, and you might not get invited back next summer. But also I want to help you with your life in general, because someday you could be a CEO, you could be a vice president, you could be the best computer programmer on the planet who does something incredible with AI. You could be anything. But if you're not open to feedback, you'll really struggle to get there, because people who aren't open to feedback tend to stall in their career and blame others. And so it's about the why. Why am I giving you feedback? And then making sure this is my perspective on this, not I'm accusing you of being evil or wrongdoing. Unless, of course, you literally caught them stealing, and then that's a whole different conversation.
Now, you may have already touched on this, but is there a go-to structure or a formula that you would say, here's how to give clear, compassionate feedback? I know you started with the why and the good intentions, which we're always talking about being intentionally intentional here on Camp Code. But is there some sort of structure or formula that you use for that clear, compassionate feedback when you have to have those conversations after you've explained all the why and all of that you've done during staff training and possibly reminded them of before you start?
Absolutely. Before the conversation, I always try to remind myself that people don't do things to other people. They do things for themselves. So if someone appears to have attacked you, what's going on for them? What are they getting out of it, right? It could be that they're feeling insecure. I actually had a staff member weirdly show up to a strategy planning meeting in almost a cartoon shirt with a Yeti on it and flamingos. It was a very interesting choice. But I sat and thought about it. I actually sat long and hard and thought, what is happening here? Because he also made a few comments that demonstrated that he was trying very hard to impose how important his role was within the team. There was a few things. And I realized it was because he had witnessed two of us having a whole sidebar conversation on some shared passion we have for community theater and felt left out. Right? So that changes the feedback. The feedback is no longer, when you said this, it really was, and it changes the ability to have the feedback and take it from where I think they might be coming from. And then for me, the formula is always about facts, right? I factually saw this, or I factually heard this, or I factually read this. Without emotion, without judgment, just I literally read these words, or I literally heard these words. Here's what it made me think or feel, right? So when you said, I don't care about looking after that particular camper's needs because she's a monster, it made me think that you're not trying to understand what might be going on for that kid today. Because generally speaking, it's a pretty good kid. That's a kid who gets along with others, and that was an anomaly. Versus, what are you thinking? You can't just be mean to kids. And so it's about the facts and the story, and then inviting them to share their perspective. And that's how I try to start, at least, with feedback. Sometimes you're met with resistance or other situations where you have to change your approach. But as a starting point, it tends to be, in my experience, one of the most effective for reducing the defensiveness and increasing the odds that the person buys in. And I will say that sometimes the person will share a version of events that doesn't actually match reality, but demonstrates that they understand the point you're trying to make. And I'm kind of okay with that. It's like the whole, why are you doing the right thing? Because you have integrity or you're worried about getting caught. Sometimes I don't actually care what your motivation is in that scenario, so long as you're doing the right thing.
And that has been hard
Beautiful.
for me to sometimes absorb. And that's one of the things I'm learning, because I'm like, you should do it for the right reasons. But you're right. And sometimes, yes, anyways, that is a whole other conversation. But I will say that structure I think is really, really helpful. The defense that sometimes I receive or my leadership team members receive when they're talking to staff members is either that staff member will react in tears and sort of build that sympathy, trigger in some of us, or they're aggressive towards you verbally. They're either their energy shifts or they completely deny any of it. They go all in, all chips in. I wasn't there. I did not come out of that cabin. How do you help? What are the strategies for, because the crying, I've gotten to a place where I'm just like, I noticed that you're upset. I understand that. It's important that we have this conversation and you're comfortable with continuing, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm starting to get there. But how do you deal with these sort of three defense mechanisms of big emotions, denial, anger, crying, tears?
Yeah, I mean, those can be tough. And the first thing I would say that's foremost is don't be disingenuous, because the tears can be genuinely very annoying. They can feel like a defense mechanism and not real to you. You can tell yourself a lot of different stuff based on someone else's reaction. So you don't need to be disingenuous. You don't need to pretend that you have empathy that you don't in that scenario if you feel like this is not real. And what I will say is that that's often the right time to come back to the fact that you're running a business. Because a lot of times the tears are a natural response. I mean, I confess I've cried in the workplace when I got yelled at for something once. I had someone call me and say, "Why did you send that email?" And I was like, "I don't know. It was stupid. I wasn't thinking." And I burst into tears. And this was in the last few years, right? So I was a seasoned professional in my late 40s at the time, right? So it does happen. And then I was embarrassed and apologized for crying, and we moved on. And I asked for advice on how I should proceed forward. But it's okay to say, listen, I can tell that you're upset from your tears, or I sense that you're upset from your tears, or your reaction tells me that you feel angry. And that's okay. You can feel angry, but I'm trying to run a business at this point. And so I understand that you're not interested in this feedback, but it's going to become, at work, we would say, a career limiting factor. But for the camp world, right, it's going to become a problem if you want to stay successful in the camp environment, right? You choose your phrase that makes sense in the camp space. And you just be very honest at that point. And to me, the key is, if the emotion is so strong you're receiving, or the defensiveness you're receiving from the other person is so strong, you have to stop because it's become problematic. That's okay as well to say, listen, I'm trying to run a business here. You're an employee of this business. There are certain things that you have to do. There are expectations you have to live up to. I get the feeling that you're not in a headspace that you can have this conversation, but we need to have this conversation within the next, and then cite your timeline. And that timeline can be an hour. It can be a day. It can be a week. Odds are you're going to want to keep it tight, because the point you're trying to make is it's okay to have the feelings. It's not okay to have the behaviors, right? All feelings are welcome, but not all behaviors.
We say that to our 5-year-old grandson all the time.
Yes.
I saw your smile and I said, where's that smile coming from? It was like, yes.
Yeah. And I think that it's one of those things where they need to learn in that moment that that's not how you accept feedback. But if they've had a visceral reaction and it's out, like they're physically reacting and it's outside of their control, okay, give them time. But even a panic attack subsides within typically, 20 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes. So you can gauge from there and say, okay, it's 1 p.m. I know this isn't working for you. I'm going to alter your schedule so that we can meet again at 2 p.m. Do what you need to do and tell me what you need to feel like you're in a safe space. But we will be having this conversation because you're not meeting expectations, and I want to help you get there because I know you can do it. right? And so you can leave it positive, but firm. And the firmness is okay because you're helping teach them there. You're helping them learn and grow how to learn and grow at that point.
So smart.
Yeah.
So smart.
I think also the pause that you've taught me to do too is, you know, is that even though I am the director, we'll say, and I do have a co-director, which is so helpful because I can say, let me chat this over with Jackie, you know, et cetera, but to have a teammate or a couple of teammates on your team, whether you're their supervisor or not, to make sure you're empowering them to be in a position where staff members know when you're having a conversation and that person's maybe throwing you off or you're not quite sure what to do, say, you know, all the things that you said, Diane. And let me check in with Shani because I want to make sure we're doing the best to give you the best feedback, but that you're also able to do the job that's needed for our campers and for your teammates. And sometimes that's and I'll make sure that Shani and I will come back to you with a time because sometimes I don't know if an hour is good enough. I don't know. I'm also thrown a little bit, and I'm not. And I don't want a disgruntled staff walking around camp. And so I'm like, I don't know what the time is, but why don't we just take a little 15-minute break? I'm going to go chat with Shani. I want to make sure. And then that sometimes, and it's like, this is what we propose, which leads me to my next question.
Nice segue.
Thank you. Thank you. One of the fears I think camp professionals have when it comes to giving feedback, and I mean this for the more generic feedback, like, you know, somebody that's consistently late, we've done some problem solving, it's not working, but it's not a skill set. It's literally a behavioral issue where we're calling them in and truthfully saying, listen, you do have to be on time. This is an issue. We have problem solved, but you need to blah, blah, blah. I'm nervous because I've had it happen. I still give the feedback, but they go and complain to their friends. And especially with those quote unquote popular staff members where campers and staff really, really like them. They're great with campers, but they're not always great with teammates because they have their core friends, but not everybody. They're not super inclusive usually. And they're going to turn people against you. How do you handle a situation where you're pretty sure that they're going to use this situation to punish you for giving them feedback?
That's a fun one. That's where we get back to the 5-year-old grandchildren.
Yes.
Oh, please enlighten me.
I wish I had all the answers on this. And now that my kids are teenagers, I experience it a little bit less. But that one's especially tough because that's the one where you have to just crack down and it's hard, right? There's an expression that my boss loves to use, what you talk about and think about comes about, right? It's like sports visualization, it's attitude, it's all those things wrapped up into one. And when they are behaving in a way that says, I'm hearing your feedback, but I'm now going to go retaliate by spreading rumors or causing dissent. If you go back to that concept of they're not doing it to you, they're doing it for themselves, and you ask yourself, what's the question? What are they getting out of this? Very frequently, what I find people who behave in that way, what they're getting out of it is that they're trying to rally the troops to their cause so that they can feel like they were right and you were wrong because they're just not mature enough to hear feedback yet. And so fundamentally, what it comes back to is that same tough conversation around, I know hearing feedback can be difficult. I know that you have many skills you bring to the table. However, at the end of the day, this is a business. Campers are our customers, and you're not meeting my expectations in, whichever area it is. And if you continue to not meet my expectations, you are choosing to be a problem employee. And I'm not okay with that because I'm paying you to be a good employee. I'm not saying you have to be the best employee who ever walked the planet, but you are, in fact, an employee of a company in the customer service industry. And those children and their parents who have spent a lot of money to come here for a rainbows and unicorns and happiness shiny experience that we all got to have as campers doesn't include you walking around saying negative things and spreading your toxic thoughts. So we need to get to the bottom of why you're having those conversations, right? We need to understand why you're choosing that behavior. Because if you don't change it, you're choosing it, right? It's actually similar concept to when people complain about something that they don't like. You're like, well, then stop doing it or bring feedback to the table. But it comes back to that concept of they're not doing it to you, they're doing it for themselves. What are they getting out of it? 9 times out of 10, I'd say it's probably that they're insecure about getting feedback or just aren't mature enough to accept that they need to change in some way. And I have colleagues in their 50s who fit that
Yeah.
bill too. So
Of course.
I know it's helpful, but the way you frame it is so helpful as well, because I think it's so frustrating on this end, and I know I have some staff that are probably reapplying this year that's the case, and I am going to re-listen to this portion of the podcast before I chat with them.
actually, one of the
Yeah.
things I really like that you've started doing with some of the staff members and even some of your most positive staff members is setting out those expectations at the start of the summer in writing around, hey, here was some of the feedback you got last year. We're so excited to work with you again, but bullet point, bullet point, bullet point on paper in black and white. You can't ignore it. These are the performance issues that we're going to be watching for and helping to coach you on so that the leadership team remembers what coaching to do and you know as a person what to listen for in feedback, because this is what we want to help you learn and grow on. And maybe over the course of the winter, you've matured exceptionally. And we're going to look at this and go, wow, I can't believe that was ever an issue. Amazing.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's still a thing.
It actually did make a difference this year with some of our staff members that we did follow up from the previous season. Together, we came up with the goals. We did highlight those behaviors, and my goodness, the shift and the willingness to absorb that feedback, because you're not around camp. Camp is so intense. Everything is just more intense, brighter, louder. The feelings are bigger. So away from camp, we could have these real conversations. And yes, those very clear bullet points that we went over with them and with the leadership team, it really made a difference for those staff members. And I kind of forgot about it until you mentioned it till now. But I was reflecting back. I'm like, yep, they were fantastic. Those staff members were fantastic this year. So yeah.
And I think it's important that our staff understands the reason for feedback isn't punishment. It isn't us saying, hey, we know more than you. It's we really want to help you reach your full potential as well as camp's full potential. So, that's very important, those kinds of conversations. So because we are such compassionate people, being camp people, how do we maintain psychological safety for everybody who's involved in these conversations while still like upholding standards?
Yeah.
That's it. That is such a big and important question, because psychological safety is so different for so many people. Everyone experiences feedback so differently, especially because we don't know their background. We don't know their culture necessarily. We don't know how they were raised. We don't know if they were given a trophy for everything they did and patted on the head and told that they could be whatever they wanted to be when they grew up, regardless of what they were good at and not good at. Or if they were someone who understands the importance of feedback, because some of them have only ever gotten yelled at by their parents. They didn't get feedback. They were told, stop that now. This is not a hotel. Go to your room. No phone for a week. And that's all they've ever had. I think the critical thing on baseline psychological safety is that you can't tailor it to the kid where if you even turn to look at them and take a breath as though you're going to speak, they burst into tears, because those ones are out there. I think those kids have to adapt to the reality of being a professional employee in a world that is North America. And so the best we can do to help them is help them understand that they have psychological safety and how to help them build their resilience a little bit. But I think psychological safety, it's a little more complicated for kids today than it was for us when we were in that teenager, young adult category, because there's so much more anxiety and fear because they're sent so much information they can't handle. I mean, I remember as a kid, we lived in France for a year. My friends wrote me a letter that said, oh my gosh, the spaceship Challenger was a rocket ship. They went to space and it exploded and people died. It was awful. And they put that in a letter that went into an envelope and got mailed across the ocean and got to me, a week later, because they didn't know if I would have heard about it. Now, like, someone in Cleveland, Ohio stubs his toe and sues his employer, and I know about it 13 seconds later, and way more than I ever needed to know. Either inundated with war and famine and plague and
Mm.
crazy politicians and anger and convoys and pandemics and all the rest. So I think the best that we can do in that environment, knowing that they're young, is really, it's about that starting with the why piece, because they often don't understand why all these things are being hurled at them or what to do with it. So if we can really start out the summer, but then each conversation with, I want to give you some feedback, and here's why, because you have tremendous potential and I want to help you get there, right? You're not in trouble. I'm helping you grow. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes it doesn't feel good. But I would like to get to a place where you actually hear feedback and feel good about it. And it can be as
Perfect.
simple as that.
We're going to have to do a part 2 to this
I think
podcast. We
so.
just have too many things, and you're so brilliant. So we're
Yes.
at that stage now. Don't worry, you'll get a little bit more from Diane in a minute, but we're at
Mm-hmm.
that stage now where we have Gab's famous recap.
Recap. Okay, everybody. Good to know. Not everybody's brains, actually, nobody's brains is fully developed until 25. There's no magical person that at 22, their brain's fully developed. It is not. It had till 25. We need to understand that because there's still a lot of growing and elasticity and big feelings, hard to process, et cetera, et cetera. That's why we're in this business, but it is really helpful for us to keep that in mind. There's also staff members that have had past experiences, and though we need to keep that in mind as well, we do have a job to do, and that is transition to prepping leadership team members for providing feedback. Explain to LTs, hey, you guys great as camp counselors. This is why you're great. The love, the care, the heart, the energy, the compassion, all of it. We have to transition that into being a leadership team member. And in a leadership team member, we're training staff members to be leaders. This is what is different from being a camp counselor. This is what we are going to help develop with you, how to do this. This is important for our organization, the safety of our campers, and the well-being of just being part of this team. So we got to give a lot of prep and transition for our leadership team members, because it is scurry out there when you're giving people feedback, and some of those people are friends with your friends, and you don't want to be on that side of it. It's really important to create that why for our leadership team to understand. We got to talk to our staff early on and not wait too big until there's, too big of an issue. Then let's get into the mindset of our staff members, helping staff members know that this is a gift. Now, they're going to be secretly rolling their eyes. Some of them will roll their eyes in front of you.
I was going to say some not so secretly.
Yes, it's going to be very obvious. And then there's going to be others that are going to just pretend like it is, but we have to show them that. And how do we show them that? We tell them the why when we're actually doing it. And we try to give feedback as much as possible. Start it in your staff interviews. Beth and I talk about that quite often. You should be providing feedback to those people that you're interviewing at the end of the interview to say, hey, at Waro or at my camp, at our camp, we believe in professional development. We do that through feedback. I'd love to give you some feedback now. Consent is helpful to allow for that feedback to happen. But what if this is a tough conversation? How do we frame it? Well, it actually starts with you, which I find really, really fascinating. Diane's take. What did I see? What did I hear? And what did it make me feel? What did it make me think when I saw that? When I saw you walking away from your group and leaving your other teammate behind, what it made me feel was you didn't realize how much stress was going to be on your teammate. I'd love to hear what was going on with you during that time. So we're presenting our experiences and we're inviting that person to come in and share their experiences. Now, whether they get it or don't is besides the point. We have to tie it back to the importance of what we value at our organization is presence and teamwork, as well as asking for help. If you needed a break, you have to communicate, et cetera, et cetera. So these are things that are important to try to bring in people and to try to make sure that things aren't going to get defensive. But what if they get defensive? Well, that becomes the other issue, but it doesn't become the main issue. The main issue is that they left the group behind. I see that you're feeling maybe frustrated or it's hard to hear this information. We can come back, but we have to come back to those issues and not get derailed by those feelings. Feedback is an art. It is hard-earned art that we're constantly trying to develop and do better with our staff members and with ourselves. The more we practice it, the better you're going to get at it. You're going to fumble. That's okay, but it's important and it's not something we can avoid. And I just want to say thank you to Diane for joining us today.
And that's why it's a famous recap. Well done, Gab.
Thanks.
All right. So if you have any thoughts on this episode or questions you'd like to ask us or Diane, we'll tell you how to do that in just a moment. But let us know any topics you'd like to discuss or guests that you recommend we have on the show or any great leadership training tips that you have to share. We would love to hear from you. And if you found our podcast to be useful, we'd appreciate you leaving us a rating or a review in your podcasting app. All right. So if they want to get in touch with you, Diane, or find out more about what you do or where you work, what would you be comfortable sharing with us? An email address or a website or
Yeah,
what have
I'm
you
more
got?
than happy to share my email address. Shall I share it immediately?
Yes, please.
Love that.
It's literally just my name. It's diane.e.slater@gmail.com. And the
Perfect.
spelling of my name, I hope shows on the screen, but diane.e.slater@gmail.com.
Excellent. And obviously, this woman's an encyclopedia of information.
Yes.
All right. Gab, where are they going to find you?
You can come and reach out to me at info@waro.com, OUAREAU.com.
Thank you. You can email me directly at beth@gocamp.pro, or you can find out all about what we do at gocamp.pro. And as it turns out, our next podcast will be how to teach staff to ask for help. So as you know, at the end of each of our podcasts, we have a best practice, and we're going to use Diane as much as we can today. So we're going to pass that over to her. And we just want to know what happens if none of this works.
Mm-hmm.
So Diane, we'll pass it to you.
Sadly, sometimes that does happen. And sadly, sometimes I do find myself when on a call with Gabs and her leadership team saying, do you actually believe that this person will turn it around? Do you think a change is going to happen? And unfortunately, sometimes the answer is no. And that's when you have to part company. And it's no different than the rules of baseball, right? Three solid attempts. If the person hasn't changed, they're out. Because if you don't say this is not okay, what you're saying is this is okay. And you're inviting other staff members to emulate the problem behaviors. But you're also creating a toxic presence in your culture, and it's going to erode your culture. And having an exit conversation, it's actually can be quite simple and quick in the sense that you've already made an effort with these people. You've already spoken to this individual. You've already given performance feedback that they have ignored, at which point you're able to sit down and have that conversation saying, unfortunately, not I'm sorry, because you're not sorry. Well, you might be sorry that they didn't turn it around, but it's an unfortunate circumstance that today is, going to be your last day with our camp because, the behavior hasn't changed and it's just not working for us. And here are, here's what's going to happen next. And it's difficult, but usually there's a wake of people left behind going, oh, thank you so much. Because it's always tip of the iceberg. What we see as leaders is never the whole thing. And there's never some secret under the water happy thing happening. There's always the, oh yeah, and then the other stories start to come out. So unfortunately, it's the best move in situations where you've tried your best, you've put it in writing, you've had the coaching conversations. It's just not happening.
Oh, so much more to dive into later. Thank you so much for that. Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network, and you can check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and a very special thank you to Diane Slater for being here and giving us so much great information and inspiration. And this is the tip of the iceberg, I think. So we'll definitely have to have you back if you're willing.
It would be my pleasure.
Excellent. We are so very grateful to you for your time and for your wisdom. And thanks for the listening, friends. Camp Hacker, bringing your world into focus.